Welcome to Mostly Minutia. I'm Colleen Lindell. This is episode 28, Happy Pride, Onna Rampaige. This episode is the third in a series of 3 episodes in honor of Happy Pride. And I have to say, it's been such a pleasure to talk with each of my guests these last few weeks regarding their coming out stories. Thank you to each person for being so vulnerable and candid and willing to totally open yourselves up in the hopes that there might be somebody listening who can relate to your story. And honestly speaking, since I've posted the last few episodes, downloads have gone up, and I've been receiving emails and messages from people just saying that their lives have been impacted by these stories. Each story has also been totally educational for me, #blessed, and this last story is no different in terms of its depth of heart. This last story is with Robert Warner, and I want to give a quick shout out to my friend Tyler Faison. My friend Tyler connected me with Robert. Robert and Tyler grew up together in Daphne, Alabama. And so when Robert and I sat down together, we were literally perfect strangers. I think I knew 3 things about Robert. I knew Robert was from Daphne, Alabama. I knew he had moved to New York, where he had worked as a drag queen. And I knew he was currently living in Los Angeles and working in the architecture industry. When we sat down together, I knew nothing of his coming out story. So as you listen to this episode, know that you and I are both experiencing Robert's story for the first time. I think you will find yourself quickly falling in love with Robert. Not only is he a great storyteller, but he is capable of telling a great story. He is charming, well-rounded, heroic at times, and humble. Honestly speaking, I think he's everything anyone would truly want in a man. He sails, he knows how to dirt bike, he did a lot of horseback riding, went to culinary school for baking, he spent a lot of time as a drag queen, and spent time as a funeral director. Please enjoy my interview with Robert. So, yeah, I just thought we could get on mic because we're like already talking about really cool things. Yeah. And I'm really pleased to talk with you, Robert, because you and I are for real strangers. I know 3 or 4 things about you.
Oh, yeah? I'm curious to know what you know.
Well, it's just the stuff that you told me that you're from Alabama.
That's correct.
You moved to New York City and you were a drag queen.
That is correct.
And that you are an executive in the architecture industry in Los Angeles.
That's it.
I do want to know more about how you got into this line of work, but I think we should go to Alabama because your story is the 3rd story in a series of coming out stories. And for this month, I've been really focusing on helping people share their coming out stories in order to maybe help somebody who's listening.
Definitely.
Maybe start us off with talking about, how you grew up and the family that you grew up in and what it was like.
Well, I'm going to try to condense it as much as I can in a very lightful way because it's a very long story. So my father originally is from Panama, and my grandfather was an engineer on the canal. So he's born and raised Panamanian, and he is a very nautical person. When he moved to America, he became a merchant marine, and he is a captain of a tugboat. He's very coastal. That's what led us to Daphne, Alabama, which is the suburb of Mobile, Alabama. So it's a port city. So my father often was at work. He would work maybe 90 days, and he would be home roughly about 30 days. So 90 on, 30 off. So obviously I grew up heavily under my mother's wing. And my mom, she had a mental handicap. She was very free-spirited, very hippie-like. And I do have one sibling, a sister. She's 6 years younger than myself. So I felt as if I was a surrogate parent in ways, helping to raise her, to kind of guide her. And still to this day, I feel as if that I've recently helped her move last year to Los Angeles from East Texas, where she was living. So
wow.
It's nice to be reunited with her, actually.
Yeah.
So we had a sailboat. That was a big part of when my father was home. He loved to sail, and he did teach me how to, chart and plot and do all of the nautical things like that.
Would you guys go on a lot of trips together as far as
Yeah,
sailing?
it was primarily just he and I, and then sometimes my sister, and we would just sail along and play chess and fish. And
How old were you when you were doing that?
anywhere from 8 years old until 15, so quite a while. And when he was away at work, another childhood friend, Lindsay, we would go to the marina, and they had little sailfish. So these are like little 10-foot single-sailed little sailboats, like personal sailboats. And we would pull them off, and she would have one and I would have one. We would rent these, and just go sailing around in the little marina, and we would actually play bumper cars in our little sailfish. So we would ram into each other, but
Are they kind of made for that?
not really, But these are like really hardy. Like they're designed to flip, and then you can take the centerboard and step on them. They'll flip back, So they're hardy little things. But so we had a sailboat, and then also in my early childhood, I got into I had a dirt bike, in Alabama, and I would go on the trails, and go dirt biking,
Yeah.
And then I got out of that, and I forget how old I was. I think maybe 13. I found out there was a once a month rodeo, maybe 2 towns over in Robertsdale, Alabama. So we went to church in Robertsdale. I grew up Mormon, actually.
Okay.
So we went to church there and found out that there was a rodeo. I begged my mom to drive me. We go there. My mom's like uninterested. She's like, what is this? Next thing you know, I find out there is a horse auction. A few days later or whatever. It's like a once a month horse auction. And I was like, oh, I've got to go to this, right? I go to this horse auction, and I sit next to this woman who also has a kid about the same age as myself. And I just start chatting with her. And I have this brilliant idea that I'm going to trade my dirt bike for her horse. And so we just start chatting. Next thing you know, we leave, and I arrange a meeting, go to her house. I ride this horse, fall in love with this horse. And I don't even ask my father's permission. And now I'm looking back, no wonder he was furious. But I trade this dirt bike for this horse, handle it all myself at like 13. Next thing you know, now I have a horse. And I become obsessed with horseback riding. So I got a Tennessee Walker. It's a type of horse. And I start riding every day for years.
Did you know how to ride? Had you ever been on a horse
but
before
I lived
that?
down the street from the stables, so I often went down and was curious.
Yeah.
But did I know how to own a Tennessee Walker, which is a gaited horse, which is a little bit different? No, absolutely not.
What's a gaited horse?
So usually horses have walk, trot, canter, gallop. That's, their speeds, if you would say. And Tennessee Walkers are gaited, so they have a walk, they have a running walk. They have a rack, and then they have a canter and a gallop. So a running walk and a rack, those are 4 beat. Each individual hoof hits the ground separately in a 4 beat pattern, and it causes a rider not to bounce at all. So in a trot, you're bouncing, and it's uncomfortable for the rider. So a Tennessee Walker, you're gliding. Basically.
Wow.
So it's a really nice ride if you want a trail horse.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's
Is
really
it
nice.
like unlike any feeling that you've ever experienced in the world besides?
Yeah, I mean, not only the feeling of how the ride is, but also having a giant animal, and horses are extremely intelligent, a giant animal that's extremely intelligent that you're controlling, that's listening to you, and that you're having fun on, and that you're going places and doing adventures together with,
Yeah.
So it's just a really unique experience. Anyway, so started horseback riding, and I did that for a few years, really enjoyed that. My good friend that lived down the street, our families were pretty inseparable. It was Lindsay and then her brother Brandon. They were the same age difference as my sister and myself, and we just were very close family. She was my best friend. She passed away in 2005 in a car accident, and that's what has molded my adult life, I believe. But so it was a charming youth. So there were sailboats, and there were dirt bikes, and there were horses. It was a country, and there's land and trails and nature.
Yeah.
And my mother, she is very Southern. She liked to cook big meals and be together with neighbors. And my father would come in, and then it was kind of a totally different experience when he was home, because then we would go grocery shopping and just take all of those groceries out on the boat and take, a trip, a month-long sailing trip.
You would do a month long?
During the summertime when we were out of school, we would go from summer start to summer finish.
Wow.
So as a child, the reason why I didn't quite appreciate it as much as I would as an adult is because low-key I was frightened, because I would only think of the movie Amistad, or any of those other sailing movies where someone dies,
Yeah.
White Squall, you name it. I would think of these movies because you're in the middle of nowhere and you could see the thunderstorms rolling in.
And you can't see, there's no land.
You can't escape a thunderstorm rolling in. You can't outsail it. So you just latch up, throw a sea anchor out, put your life vest on, and ride it out,
It's interesting that you were afraid like that because you grew up with this. Like, I'm afraid of it, but I didn't grow up with it at all.
Yeah.
And you would just be thinking about that.
Here we go. Let's bore it up,
And was it scary?
It was. I mean, part of it was not frightening. So we would be out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. I would throw out a line and a bumper on the end of the line, and I would jump into the water, not knowing what was in the water, and then just grab onto the bumper and have the boat drag me, open Gulf. Wow. So, because it was so hot,
Yeah.
So things like that wouldn't frighten me. But I think the thunderstorms and the rough seas frighten me the most. But.
Yeah. So what is that like when a storm rolls in? And
well, you can see it. First, you can smell it, actually. You can smell the rain, and then you can start to feel the breeze, and then you see the clouds. And you can see the wind patterns of where it's going and where you're going. So you're dealing with the tide. Not really the tide if you're out in the Gulf, but the current and the wind,
But when a storm like that comes, you don't you're going to have to work with the current. It's going to possibly push you off course, right?
And that's what a sea anchor does. So it's it's like basically an ice cream cone, and one end is tied to the bow of your boat, and you throw it overboard, and the current funnels through the cone and just keeps your bow into the current so that you don't roll over, basically.
Oh, okay.
So
wow.
Yeah.
I can't believe you guys would I mean, that I've never experienced anything like that in my life. I mean, we were just shooting in Puerto Rico, and we did some boat shooting.
Right.
And at one point I went on an excursion that took us 45 minutes out to this remote island. And we were like this, like up and down and up and down. And I was like screaming with laughter because I was like, I had never experienced that before. And then I was thinking, oh, but I have to do 45 minutes of this. And I don't know how to, I didn't know how to make my body work with that motion.
Right.
So I just found myself continuously screaming with delight and laughing. It felt like a roller coaster ride.
Basically, that's it. Yeah, you just have to get in sync with the rhythm and just enjoy it.
Okay.
Basically.
Yeah.
And try not to focus on the shoreline or the visual break from the sky and the water, because then you see how far you're going up and down, and that's when you get a little sick.
Oh.
Yeah.
I always heard that you're supposed to focus on the horizon because it's the most stable thing.
Yeah, I don't know if I would do that.
Well, I'm going to listen to you, obviously. Yeah. So you're saying just get into the rhythm of it.
Just get into the rhythm of it, feel it, just ride it out.
Okay. So what I ended up doing was when that was happening, because we were in a catamaran and everyone was inside. Okay. I chose to go outside to the back part of the boat. Then I just felt like I was having fun.
Yeah. The back part is going to be in the smoothest area. So, I mean, typically in a sailboat or a boat, they have the front cabin and the rear cabin. If you have a choice, you want to be in the rear cabin area because it's the smoothest.
Okay.
And outside, definitely. Inside, you'll definitely get sick.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you do when you guys were sailing and there's a storm? Everyone has to go inside, right?
Yeah. Well, you don't have to. You can you can latch yourself in, so you have your safety lines, and you have your vest, your life vest, and your harness, and you strap yourself to the safety lines, and you can either sail in your slicker suit in the storm, or you can board up your hatches, throw your sea anchor out, and just ride it out inside.
Dang.
Which I've done both. We've been in storms that were severe, and my father was like, go inside. And I think in one scenario, I was just like, I'm not going inside. No, I've got to see what's happening, because I have slight control issues. So,
Slight control.
It's better for me to be, visible of what's going on than
okay. So
clueless and inside.
Oh, maybe I have the control issues too.
Yeah.
Which is why I was like, get me out of this thing.
I need to know what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. So that was fun, and actually, I know now I'm sounding like a terrible person. So I traded in the dirt bike, and now I'm going to tell you how we got rid of the sailboat. So
I thought you were going to tell me like how you got rid of the horse.
No, the horse, so, his name was Geronimo.
Oh.
I was 17 years old, and I was moving on, Alabama, I was trying to spread my wings and move on. And there was a woman that also had a Tennessee Walker in the same barn. And she recently got married, and her husband wanted a horse. And so I sold him to her. So I felt confident in that decision.
Yeah.
But that's right around the time that I really came out of the closet.
Oh.
So, I always feel as if I was out of the closet, really. But 17 is when I started to really be proud of who I was and to be even more confident in myself and open. And so I decided to uproot from Daphne and really try to explore around, I guess.
Just really quick, tying up the sailboat. You said you were going to tell me how you got rid of the sailboat.
So
and then we were going to go into that story.
Okay, so my father, he was basically working, right? And the boat was a little bit much for him to sail by himself. And I was getting a little older, and I was, doing the horse thing, and I was getting a little bit more resistant to going out with him. And so he said, I think I have a buyer for the sailboat. So Daphne in Alabama, just down is this town called Fairhope. And so on a sailboat that stays in the water, if it's made out of fiberglass, then you have to be mindful of these things called blisters. It's just where the fiberglass kind of protrudes out in, small disc-like areas. And typically you have to sand them down, and make sure your hull is blister free, basically. Whenever somebody buys a boat, they like to haul it out of the water and check for blisters. So the closest place to haul the boat out of the water was in Fairhope. So I sailed the boat by myself to Florida, had it hauled out of the water, was inspected, and they bought it. And so he came home and was boatless, and I was like, well, this is what you wanted, I honestly don't think he thought I would, sail it to Fairhope, perhaps. But I didn't do it maliciously or anything like that, obviously, It was just, I don't know if he had full confidence I was able to do something, and he thought it would be delayed and delayed and delayed. And then it was sold, and, ultimately everyone was happy, so.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're so young, and you're mastering like the art of these things, these big things, like
right.
Horse riding, sailing, and.
Right. And in my time in New York, I realized that. I realized that there's people in New York City that are born and raised in New York, and they have a more worldly view of things, but they don't have necessarily the same experiences that I was privy to growing up, living in the South, in the country, on the coast. So,
I feel like the things that you were doing require a lot of strategic thought, and that's like a working out of the mind.
Yeah.
Because you're working with things that you can't control.
Right.
It's quite a feat, I think, to be like this young person and learn how to put out these fires in this way, or work with what you have.
Yeah.
And even dirt biking, I think.
Yeah, you have to control your speed and the terrain, definitely, because I've been in some, especially being such a young child doing that, and you want to go fast and do jumps and all of these things. And then you realize, well, sand moves and you fall. And your body is fragile, actually. So,
did you enjoy playing chess as a young person?
I did enjoy that. That is a memory that I cherish. Just being on the boat with my dad, sailing, playing chess. That was a nice memory.
That sounds really wonderful. Like a heavenly state.
Yeah, it's nice.
So you said that you felt like you were always out of the closet, but you didn't start becoming proud of who you are till you were 17. I'm wondering if you can talk about like when you first realized that you were attracted to men and how you were able to just be out of the closet right from the get-go.
Well, I think that growing up, I honestly did not think that I was unusual in any type of way. I just thought I was me. I always, as a child, I was told that I was very quiet and proper and not really, a problem child, I guess. Mm-hmm. As far as, who I am, I never thought that I was unusual or weird until I would say about middle school. Mm-hmm. I guess there were certain words that I would say and I would slang it a certain way or lisp, do the little gay lisp a certain way. Mm-hmm. Or I guess my posture or the way I walked was a little flamboyant. And some of the other kids in the South, they would say I was sweet. You got a little sugar in you. And I didn't really per se know what that meant. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, yeah, I am sweet. I'm a sweet guy, mm-hmm. And then, so I always knew that, I don't know, that I was me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't per se, a lot of times act like some people, my peers that were around me. But then I think the moment was whenever I was in middle school, I had a cast on my arm, my right arm. It was after one of the surgeries. So instead of the PE class, I ended up working in the front office. And I remember there was a girl that I had a crush on. I think this was like 7th grade, maybe. Mm-hmm. I had a crush on a girl, and I asked my mom if she would take me to Dillard's, which is a department store in the South.
Yeah.
And I ended up buying, those pre-cased necklaces, like the mm-hmm. flat sterling.
Yeah,
like
they
whatever.
Usually have like a gem in it.
Yeah,
a
like
gemstone.
some sort of piece of jewelry. And I walked during lunch hour to her, and I tried to give her a necklace. She marched back over and like slammed it back down in refusal of my gift. And so I was just like, you know what? This is it. This is the last effort and then she started dating this guy soon after that. And I remember a conscious thought, and I thought to myself, I think I actually care for who she's dating more than her.
Wow.
So, and then I was just like, And the reason why I mentioned that I worked in the office is because there was a girl that came in that was one of her friends that I knew, that I didn't like, but I knew, and she was nice. And she comes in, and she was not feeling well or something, and she was to see the nurse. And I was just like, would you mind if I gifted you this? I have no need for it. And I ended up giving it to her, the necklace, and she liked it and was appreciative. And so I think that was, to me, that signified a closing chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just like, that's it,
Mm-hmm.
And so that was middle school and whatnot. And then high school, this is where I was a rebel child. My father actually got me a car when I was 15 because he wasn't going to be home for my 16th birthday. So my mom and I, when I had my permit, would drive my car. And then my mom, in her hippie-like kumbaya state, she was just like, as long as you don't get in a wreck and you have your permit, just drive safely, And so I would drive this car at 15, around. And that's whenever I would go across the bay to Mobile, which is a larger city. And I would go to the store, and I would buy these CDs, I remember buying Madonna and Cher, and just like blasting it in the car. And I mention music because that's how I met Tyler. I played a trombone, and then I eventually played saxophone after that. So I used music as a gateway. So any of my friends that I did have, I basically said, let's go to this place because I like the music. Mm-hmm. And it was a gay place, and I was like, oh, it has better music than this other place, and so I would try to like lead people to believe I was going for music and not the environment. But I guess it all plays into the same.
Was it even live music?
No. It was a DJ,
Yeah, dance. It has better dance music.
Yeah, so...
that's a really amazing that you were playing a brass instrument and then you went to a woodwind.
Yeah, so it was bass clef to treble clef. But I got bracelets, so it was a little uncomfortable for me.
Trombone-wise?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's painful.
So I was right in the midst of that. So I switched first to tenor sax. So
how old were you, or what grade were you in when you did that?
This was all middle school, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Now, you had mentioned before that your mother you said she has a mental handicap.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say what that is?
Yeah.
Or what you mean by that?
So she actually had schizophrenia, and she was medicated. So there's a lot of misconceptions with that illness, and a lot of media labeling to that illness. And there are a lot of people that are not medicated properly that act certain ways. Fortunately enough, my family situation, my mom, she was on her medication, and she had a nurse that would come to her house once a week, and she would get some sort of booster shot, in case she didn't take her oral medication. And basically schizophrenia is a chemical imbalance of the brain. You see things or you hear things that are not there. And I kind of understood as a child that, okay, sometimes if she doesn't take her medicine, she sees or hears things. I get that. But I didn't really understand growing up through my whole life. Actually, she had 2 times, we called them spells. She had 2 times that her medication kind of wore off, or the milligram dosage was incorrect, whatever variable it was, that her symptoms started to come out. And when that happens, she did have to go to the hospital. Basically, you have to get weaned of all the medicine that you're on, and then the symptoms really come out, and then you're put back on new medicine. The reason why I can say that I realize what the illness truly is because we did visit her in the hospital, and I could, through conversations with her, I could see the illness and true effect of what it is, And on a different side of that, I could see an illness, what she had, and I could see a medicated illness and who she is when she was medicated, And it's truly remarkable. As a child, she was a musical prodigy with a clarinet, and she ended up changing schools in high school, like her last year of high school. She just got in the wrong crowd of people. And, this was back in the day,
Yeah, it was in the 60s or?
60s, 70s. So she started experimenting with drugs, and she went into a coma. And when she woke up, that's whenever her symptoms manifested.
Wow.
So her brain chemistry, I suppose, changed whenever she was in this coma. They say that it's a dormant gene, and there's certain things that could trigger it, whatnot. But so.
Well, that's really amazing that she was able to have a family.
Oh, yeah.
And pass on her talents to you guys.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. She passed away from lung cancer, actually, 3 years ago. And so my sister and I, we went to Daphne, and we were going through her things in her house, and we found she kept journals. And my sister has the journals, and occasionally she'll send me her quotes for the day or her writings for the day. One of her excerpts that my sister shared with me this week, actually, she was saying about her marriage to my father, and she was just saying, I hope that she can fight past her issues that she has with her mental illness and keep things on track with my father, I always viewed my parents, I still do, in a certain light, and to actually see a different light of their other struggles that were private and not shared with me, it's very interesting, actually.
Yeah. So, it's like you're getting to see the very human side.
Yeah, different side, definitely. So.
And really great that she was able to process through writing. Also process what she was thinking about. Yeah,
she was very artistic. So musically, and then she painted, and she would write, and she was an artistic soul, definitely. So I wouldn't change things for anything. If I could, take a pill and go back until I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
No, I would keep things the way they exactly were, because definitely molded me the way that I am now,
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
Especially about mental illness in general. My mom is clinically depressed, and her depression, it didn't exist growing up.
Right.
It was triggered by a few deaths in our family, and she cannot come out of it.
Yeah.
And, so she's been going from medication to medication, and she just tried ketamine. And the other day we were on the phone, and you talk about like a medicated state and stuff. We were on the phone together, and she asked me a question. She said, Colleen, do you ever have hope that things are going to change? And she never asked questions like that. So I said, yeah, Mom, I do. Actually, I had a feeling a few weeks ago that a huge change was going to transpire.
Right.
I'm like, why'd you ask that? And she's like, I do. I just feel it, Colleen. I do feel things are going to change, and I have a lot of hope about it. And I said, that's good. And then she asked me to tell her a story about something. So I was telling her a story, and in the middle of the story, she goes, you got to try ketamine.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Just like, yeah, when you have all these thoughts running through your head, you can pick and choose what you want to think about.
Yeah.
And I felt like it let me have a window into how her mind is working. I have a sister as well, so I called my sister and told her that. I was like, Mom just said this, and she's like, oh my God. She's like, Colleen, I just feel so bad for Mom because she can't pick and choose what she wants to think about right now.
Yeah.
She's just like underneath the thoughts. I was thankful for that conversation with her, even though it's sad.
Yeah, it's a little strange for a child to, hear things like that from their parent.
Yeah.
But, I'm a firm believer that there's not necessarily sometimes one easy fix. Sometimes it's a multiple series of different therapies. Maybe the medication plus speaking to you, the combination of those two things,
Yeah, that's interesting. Like voicing.
Like voicing it out, and to someone that she knows and trusts and loves, and then a medication therapy, But I'm listening to the story, and I'm thinking of things that my mom would do as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. What were you saying? Her kumbaya state or her
just
hippie?
Her like hippie kumbaya. She was just so happy and funny and nice and just so peaceful, Whenever I was shared that diary excerpt, that was one of the first times that I cognitively realized that she had struggles in a certain way. Because she was always so, everything's going to be fine. No matter what. At the end of the day, if something happens terrible today, tomorrow is a new day. That attitude, I'm sure, is from the trials that she went through in her life.
What's her name, by the way?
Leslie.
Yeah. Okay. What's your dad's name?
Robert. I'm a junior.
Do you like being junior?
Well, that's a little tricky question. I've since dropped the junior.
Okay.
So technically, I believe, legally, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that whenever the senior passes away, you can officially drop the junior.
Oh.
And my father hasn't passed away, but we haven't spoken in quite a while, and I'm not really hopeful that we will again.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess sometimes we have to make that division so our identity can return to its fullness of who we are.
Yeah, I agree with that. A junior, I feel as if, not really, but you're always in the shadow. You're living in the light of the senior, I suppose, And I don't know, some of the things that he has said, I don't, I just want to separate from a little bit,
Yeah. So let's go back to, you said you had that cognitive thought about the closing of that chapter.
Right. So I closed that chapter. I had the idea. I was like, actually, I think I like her boyfriend more. I'm more physically attracted to him. It was very confusing. I was like, well, she's beautiful. But then I was like, do I like her as a friend? Or is it more than that, and then finally I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go with what I'm comfortable with. Honestly, for a long time, whenever I was a teenager, I thought that I was attracted to men because I'm a man and I know how to please myself. And so I would know how to please another man. And so, the female body was just, I was not familiar with it. And so it was intimidating, and the feelings progressed to, I'm just more comfortable around males romantically. And so then I realized, and I started accepting myself. At 17, ended up selling Geronimo. And that's whenever I met someone and was in an on and off again relationship for 6 years. And that was a very strange relationship.
Yeah.
This person was 15 years older than myself. So I was 17 and he was 32.
How did you meet him?
Well, I ended up going out to a bar that was an 18 up bar, and I snuck in. Then I went to leave, and I saw a group of people where I knew one guy, and they were all leaving together. One of the guys was like, do you want to come over to this like after party type thing? And I was like, yeah. And then I ended up going to this guy's name's Rob. So it was Robert and Rob, very strange. And I ended up going to his house, and a group of people there hanging out. And then the next weekend, it was very gutsy now that I think of it, because the next weekend I just went over to his house and knocked on his door.
But you're kind of a gutsy guy.
This is like,
it seems
the very early years of cell phones, So it's like that little Nokia brick kind of era, So, right.
Yeah.
So I just knocked on the door, and they were going to New Orleans. So I ended up saying, okay, why not? And so I just went to New Orleans, And so after a few weekends of just like hanging out like that, it just kind of progressed into something more. And I think that he definitely was a more stable person and established and stable. And I think that's really what I was needing and was looking for at the time, obviously.
Yeah. Was that your first relationship then with?
No, the first relationship was with this guy that was actually in Mississippi. Oh, but let's get to the coming out story, actually, to my parents.
Okay.
So there was a guy that I met, I think, at the same 18 Up bar. So Mobile, Alabama is a French city, and it was established before New Orleans. And so it's the originator of Mardi Gras, and it's a port city, and there's a street called Dauphin Street that is its smaller version of Bourbon Street. And so around Bourbon Street, there's a few gay bars, and it's termed the Fruit Loop, basically, by everyone. At the time, there was an 18 Up bar that's since closed. I think they closed because so many underage people were smuggling themselves in. But I ended up going there a lot, and I met this guy. He was from Mississippi, and I was in high school at the time. I think I was 16. We ended up seeing each other often, even though he was in Mississippi. He was in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So it's like real Mississippi, just all your fantasy notions of Mississippi in real life.
Yeah.
So, and long story short, a cell phone bill came in, and my father called me. And so a lot of my relationship with my dad is via the phone because of his work. And so he calls me and he's like, the phone bill's very expensive this month. Who lives in Pascagoula, Mississippi? And I was like, my friend Ian. And so this is like during the Singular Wireless era before AT&T.
Yeah.
And these phone bills are like paper copies, and it's like a
line item.
Yeah, detailed phone bill. And so he can see time of day, length of call. At this point, my mother has already met Ian. Okay. So basically, he had some really strong words. And I got a little hot-tempered over the phone, and I said some really strong words back to him. And so being from Panama, he uses the derogatory gay terminology. And so I just repeated it back to him. I said something really rude back to him, and over the phone told him. If my memory serves correct, I think he left work early, and he rushed straight home. And he had 5 $100 bills, and he just threw the $100 bills, and he said, get out of my house. And that's whenever my mom picked up the money, and she literally ripped it up and threw it back at him and said, don't talk to my son like that. At that time, I was just like, all right, I have a parent that dislikes me for a certain reason, and I have a parent that is supporting me for a certain reason. And so I was just, comforted in that fact. And I was saddened by that fact. I mean, it was a really hard time for me, you know, because the car that he got me whenever I was 15, he took away. In Alabama, you know, there's no public transportation. You have to drive everywhere, you know, so.
How old were you when this all happened?
This all was happening right around 17 years old.
Okay.
There's more to the story. There's more to the crumbling family story than my coming out. I'll share it with you.
Okay.
So my dad is a captain of a boat, and every so often there's what it's called a captain's meeting. So all the captains in this company go to this meeting. Usually in these meetings, the wife goes with. My mom didn't want to go, and so I ended up going. And so for a child to go, you're put up in a hotel, there's room service, you know. I would just like swim all day and eat all day, you know.
Yeah, it's like luxury.
Yeah, right. So a little vacation. So this one was in Texas, in Corpus Christi, and we ended up, after it was done, driving back, and my father was tired, and so we ended up pulling over in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, and getting a hotel room, and he was just like, oh, order something to eat. I'm too exhausted to even go to the restaurant. I'm like, all right, whatever. And then the phone rings, and then the next thing you know, he gets all perked up, and he ended up going to the hotel bar area, and it really wasn't wise on his behalf because I was like 15 at the time. I have eyes and ears and I'm curious, you know. Right. So he goes to the hotel bar, and where he met this woman who I had no idea who she was. And here I am, like private investigator, like snooping around the corner, like peeking over the corner, you know, like all this. And it was one of those weird hotels where there's like a pool that like wraps around in the lobby area. And like, I don't know. So I ended up spying on him all night, basically. And then he ended up walking to her car and he kissed her. And then it's like childhood notions shattered. He gets back to the hotel room, and I'm like all pretending like I wasn't spying on him. And then I was obviously in a foul mood to him, right? And then he gets mad at me for being mad at him because he has no idea I knew. And I'm like thinking about it. You're in the same hotel, restaurant, bar area. Like, get it together. Then, not really having as close a relationship with my father as my mother, I told my mom what I saw. You know, not like the second I walked through the door when I got home, but like, you know, when he went back to work, I couldn't hold that inside, you know, so I ended up telling her, and then she went on this whole rabbit trail with calling psychics. That's what her thing was. She would call psychics, you know.
So with the information that you gave her, she would
call psychics. So then it turns out that she did call a private detective, and she did have pictures, and she ended up suing the company my father worked for. He was let go. It was very dramatic. And I think that played into part with his distaste whenever I came out. Like, I think everything kind of came full circle, you know?
Okay.
And so being Mormon, like, there was a whole backlash on the church with him. And it was just this whole dramatic situation. And our family went from, you know, sailboats and these cars and horses and all this to now my mom, like, the church paid for her divorce lawyer, and you know, she ended up getting a condo, and like everything changed dramatically in a year, you know.
This is all when you're 17?
Yeah, all when I was 17. So I literally went to Mississippi for the summer, and when I came back, everything, my childhood home was gone. And then he took the car back, and it was just the epitome of rock bottom, you know. So
where was your sister during all of this?
So my sister, so I left out a little detail also. So our house caught on fire, and
your childhood home.
My childhood home caught on fire, and I always thought of it as a cherry of a candle. The candle was blown out, and the cherry of the candle went behind the dresser where there was papers that had fallen, and it caused a fire. But that's me being optimistic. You know, the fact of the matter is, I don't know what happened. You know, I was upstairs. It was a 2-story home. I was upstairs asleep. Next thing you know, I heard fire. The next thing you know, I was not, like, I was taking my time putting my contacts in, you know, like, And anyway, the house,
you were like, I don't need to be serious about
yeah, and it was
fire.
a serious fire, actually, smoke and all,
Yeah.
So her bedroom caught on fire, and then they hosed everything out. She ended up having to go to the hospital, and when my mom got out of the hospital, that's whenever my dad just served divorce papers. So I thought that was really poor taste, So she got out of the hospital. I think he asked the doctor for her permission to do this before. I don't know. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt on that. And then she moved back into the house. Next thing you know, my dad comes to visit, and he says that he's going to go get ice cream with my sister. And my sister basically gets in the car, and he never returns with her. He apparently went to court and got temporary custody of my sister, saying that my mom was an unfit mother because she caused a house fire, and she just never returned. And it was a very dramatic time. What show was I watching? There was a guy, I don't even remember, Dr. Drew. I remember watching like every time I could watch a show because I was trying to relate to, to get some sort of like advice of what to do, because I was like all over the map. She never came back. My mom was a wreck. I was a wreck.
Yeah.
And through the court system, a judge said that he had to live a certain amount of miles from my mom. And so at the time, he was living with the woman he was seeing in Louisiana. So he ended up moving her to Alabama, close, which is even more awkward, actually, because now you're like living down the street from basically an arch enemy, right? And I held a lot of hatred at this time towards him specifically, and also towards her, because like she knew what was going on with everything.
Like, how can you do this? How can you?
I mean, my feelings towards that, I basically just had to, and it's really sad to say, but I had to just try to forget I'm not trying to say I tried to forget my sister. That's not really what I'm trying to say, but I'm trying to say that I had to focus more on other things. I had to focus on my mom and keeping her to where she was balanced. We had to move the household and get help my mom to get all set up. Luckily, my father took care of my mom through alimony and whatnot.
Yeah.
But so I basically just had to tell myself that my father's working, my sister is living with this woman, and that I have to have confidence that she will do my sister right. Basically, I was forced to feel this way.
Yeah. I mean, you had to cope with it.
Yeah, I had to cope somehow. So there was a lot of hatred, and I was looking at it through the eyes of a child. Like, you're supposed to be there and protect and care for, and look what you've done.
Yeah.
But many, many years later, I look back, I see an adult that made a decision for himself and not his family. I see that he made a decision to leave what he started and to pursue other things for happiness for whatever reason, and not that I respect that in any way. It's just I accept it for that. And so my sister, she was raised by her, and then they ended up getting married. So my sister was raised by my stepmother, and my mom, being as friendly and nice as she is, she accepted the fact that he found another woman, I guess. And she established a friendship with her as much as it could have been.
Yeah.
And as soon as, I suppose, the marriage was finalized, they could move. So they ended up moving to Texas.
And then so
I lost contact with her, really.
Your
basically.
sister.
Yeah. When she graduated college, I was in New York already, and I surprised her at her graduation. And that was a big moment because I called her and I congratulated her and just said that I couldn't make it, and then I surprised her. And then when my mother passed away, like she and I made a vow to reconnect, and that we are family, and that we really need to rely upon each other and be closer. And she's lived here for a year now, and we're establishing, a sibling bond again, which is really nice. Yeah.
Wow. So when you were going through all this, and you said you had moved to Biloxi and then you came back to Mobile, How long did you stay there?
The reason why I moved to Mississippi, I think, is because the guy I was kind of seeing in high school, low-key seeing in high school. I don't know. I was comforted in a sense by him with everything going on. He was my like first guy that I dated, my coming out guy, you know, whatever. Yeah. So I was comforted by Mississippi, but that's really weird to say because who as a gay person says Mississippi is comforting? I don't know. But so I ended up going there and it wasn't for me at all. And so I ended up coming back to Mobile. The whole 6-year thing was on again, off again, on again, off again. I ended up moving to Florida with my childhood friend, Lindsay. So this is this story here. She ended up, their family got more horses. They moved from Daphne to Stapleton. At that point, it was a different school system. I lost contact with her. Mm-hmm. You know, I maybe saw her once a year after that, right? And we were extremely close. Every day we saw each other. One day, I was eating at a restaurant in Daphne, and I bumped into her. And so it was summertime. It was summer for school for her. We hung out all summer. And that summer, I realized that she was open sexually to, you know, males, females, like she was just fluid in her preferences. Mm-hmm. And that's whenever I, you know, told her about my preferences. And it was just like, wow, this person that I was so close to is accepting. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we can relate with each other. And so we ended up, she basically pulled up and she was like, I'm going back to school and you're coming with me. I don't care where you're living. I don't care where you're working. I don't care anything about what's going on in your life, you know. And we both had a conversation, and the years that we were apart were difficult for us because everything that happened to me and, like, you know, everything that happened in her life. And so we realized that we're good for each other, you know. So I was like, you know what, let's do it. So I packed up my stuff and moved to St. Augustine. And it was probably the best summer that I have ever had. And for her birthday, she had tickets to see a band, and I was supposed to go, and I told her I didn't want to go, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then she got mad, and I got mad that she still was going to go, you know. And then I helped her, like, get ready and all that. And the car broke down, and they were in one of her friends' like old big body Mercedes, you know, like the diesel Mercedes. And it breaks down. She calls me, and I was just like, you know, if I'm going to take your truck to pick you guys up, I only have how many seats in this truck? And this is a car full of people. No, I'm not going to. And at that time I was like, ha ha ha, you know, I'm glad I didn't go. Right. And then it turns out that she was just like, all right, I'll call you back. She called me back, and AAA was going to come and pick them up. And they came and picked them up, and on the interstate back, it was the tow truck and the car being towed. And then the guy with the Mercedes, his girlfriend, in a Volkswagen Beetle. And so she was in the back seat of the Beetle following the car being towed. And it narrowed down to one lane because of construction. It was nighttime, and an 18-wheeler, he dozed off, or he wasn't paying attention or whatever. And he hit the back of the Beetle when it was pretty much at a standstill.
Oh my gosh.
So Lindsay, she died instantly.
Yeah.
And so this was in the middle of the night, and some guy called me that she tried to set me up with. And I was annoyed that he was calling me.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, they broke down. Why are you calling me? And then he told me and that she passed away, and I don't know. It was that moment on, I can honestly say, no matter what else I've told you today, that moment on really is whenever I feel as if I became an adult. I feel as if I emotionally had to realize I have to control my emotions and I have to regulate my energy moving forward, because as much as I can be in love with another human being in a non-sexual way, just in a compassionate, just a connection, and the person passed away, you know, and I didn't get to say goodbye, and, you know, it was a closed casket funeral, and the energy I feel as if the horse world in Daphne, Alabama is a small little community. And whenever I sold the horse and my family was kind of falling apart because of the divorce and coming out of the closet and all of this, there was a lot of gossip And so when Lindsay pulled up and whisked me away to St. Augustine, they were like, oh, living with Robert, like they just assumed I was a bad influence for whatever reason. And so I just felt a lot of like, not only did I lose this person, but I also lost her family, because there was a lot of blame, I suppose, a lot of hurt and wanting to point blame somewhere. So that was St. Augustine.
But so you still are not in contact with her family?
Well, this is going to lead to another dramatic story.
Do you think it's drama, or do you think that this is just life?
I mean, no, I think my life is unusually dramatic.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm about to intro a second house fire story.
Really?
Yes.
That's what you're about to intro. Do you ever share these stories like...
occasionally to close people that I meet, yes.
I know I'm recording your stories now, but I think they need to be recorded further in some... I don't know. I almost feel like you need to go to the Moth and share your stories there.
Yeah.
Maybe, have you done that before?
No, I haven't. I always felt as if I definitely would write a book because there's a lot of chapters,
Yeah.
No, but long story short, I did write a long letter to her family explaining things because Lindsay was seeing someone and I don't know behind closed doors what she told her family, the true extent of the relationship. And I did not feel as if after she passed away, it was my obligation to speak further of the subject, honestly.
Yeah.
And so her family wanted certain answers and I refused to give answers. I eventually moved from St. Augustine back to Alabama. The 6-year on and off again relationship, I ended up calling him up and saying, I'm coming home tomorrow. So I ended up moving back to Alabama, and her family came to my job in the middle of the workday, and I was working at a bank, and high drama, and I refused to answer certain questions that I felt as if I was pinned up against the wall to answer. So I put all of my thoughts and explanations of why I didn't want to answer these questions into a long letter, and the letter was in my car, and 2 a.m, Rob's house, he had a beautiful, so Mobile, Alabama, it's a historic city. His house was built in 1913 and the fire seals were not updated. And so the baseboards where they meet the floor, when the house would expand and contract in the winter, it could get drafty. And the electrical work, I suppose that the outlet was arced somehow and it caught the plaster inside the wall on fire. The house is built out of wood that's 100 years old and it just engulfed into flames. And so my car, the letter was, it burnt. So the whole house burned down. It was 2 a.m. I was outside in my underwear with the cell phone with the dog. Rob tried to go back in the house, had a chokehold to him. He was panicking. Called 911. Whole house was destroyed, 100%. I had underwear. So at this point, Lindsay died, emotionally devastated. All of my physical memories of her were destroyed. And the letter was destroyed. So I took that as the ultimate sign to leave things as they are. Don't try to stir the pot and explain things further than what they should be explained. After that point, I told myself, you know what? I'm going to have to take control of this is my life, and I'm not going to live I can't do this. I can't do this roller coaster up and down, hiding, not hiding in a closet, but being unsure of myself, being uncomfortable with myself, feeling as if I'm judged by everyone around me, having a unstable family, like all of these variables that have happened, I have to release all of that energy. And so I made a conscious effort at that time just to forgive everyone, just clean slate. No matter what happened, who it was, I forgive everyone. I release all the negative energy. I'm going to, one step at a time, try to move things forward into a direction that I want it to move forward. So the relationship I was in fizzled out, and I went to the thrift store and I got pillows, like couch throw pillows. And I remember putting them down on a studio apartment floor, and that's where I slept, cut my cell phone off because I didn't want communication with him. I had no car. And so I was going out downtown Mobile, walking a few blocks away, calling from a payphone, a taxi to come and pick me up and take me to work. And then I would get a ride from someone at work home. And I told myself, all right, if this isn't rock bottom,
Right.
and this is not how I want to be and how I want to live. So I ended up getting it together in Mobile. And then I got to a point where I was pretty comfortable in an apartment that was furnished, had a job I liked, a car. And then I made a decision to move to Florida, to the beach. I went on vacation actually, and I went to Miramar Beach, which is outside of Destin on the Panhandle of Florida.
Wow.
It's a beautiful beach. And I said to myself, this is a version to me of paradise. And why don't I live here? And so I ended up moving to the beach, and I ended up getting a job and was living the life. And then I realized this is a tourist town. Winter is coming and there's no tourist, and there is zero gay life in this town, And so I was like, have I made the right decision? At that time, I actually met someone that had a house there. And I was actually really focusing on my physical fitness at the time. And I went to a restaurant which had a bar, and I was watching the Stanley Cup, and I was drinking an MGD 64 because I was watching my calories. And this guy at the end of the bar was making fun of my MGD 64. And so I was like, here we go, right? It turns out he was making fun of me in a... in a bashful, in a flirtatious way.
Yeah.
And so we ended up starting to talk. We ended up, the place closed. We were talking outside, and he just became one of my best friends. We spent the summer together, and he was moving to New York. And I said, you know what? I'll fly up to New York with you, and just hang out while you like get your apartment situated. So I ended up flying up to New York, and while I was there, I went on the Craigslist and found a roommate. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna move to New York. I know one person.
Yeah.
And so I had just a couple $100 and summer clothes only.
Yeah.
And I moved to New York, and it was probably one of the best decisions I could have made.
What made you decide, like when you went with your friend?
I just loved. Recently, I spoke to a friend of mine. I'm really connected more now than ever to people via Facebook that I grew up with and were friends with. But recently, one guy specifically said, I thought you were from somewhere else. I didn't know you were raised here. And you never seemed to fit in. And I'm glad that you found somewhere that you could fit in. And he's a gay guy in Mobile, And so I agree with him 100%. I never felt like I truly fit in. And the reason why I liked it so much is because I instantly saw the diversity. I instantly saw the hustle and bustle. And growing up, I would see Taxi Cab Confessions and other shows,
Right.
And I would always have these fantasy notions of what life would be, And then when I remember I was walking down 9th Avenue a few days after I arrived, and I was looking around, I was like, this is how it is. I want to experience this for a little bit, In New York, if you choose to, you will never have to see the same person again. I'm not saying that romantically. I'm just saying that in general, You can paint yourself orange and walk down the street, strut your stuff, and feel confident and proud or embarrassed, however you may feel. And you can come home and shower, and then you'll never see the same people again, if you choose to. And so I just found that very alluring coming from South Alabama, where you see the same people every day, And so I started going out, was working. I would get off at a decent time, like 6, 7 p.m. I would go to a happy hour before I would go home, sit there, chat with the bartender. I would look around, and I would see people, and I'm like, certain people would walk in, and even though I'm here multiple days a week, these people seem to know everyone. Like, what do they have, And then I started contradicting myself and missing the small town familiarity of, people. And so I was just like, you know what? How do I have both? How do I have people feel as if they know me and say hello and be friendly, but also be anonymous at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I have that? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go down a road. And so I started watching YouTube tutorials. And the next thing you know, I went and I bought some makeup. And the next thing you know, so I had started dating a guy, and his family lives in LA. So we flew to LA. He was visiting his family. I flew with him. And we went to Hollywood Boulevard, and they have the shoe stores with the large size shoes, right? So I bought a pair of large heels. And my first year in New York, I did nothing for Halloween because I was getting my life together. I was like, you know what? Year number 2, I'm going to do something good. So I wanted to be Peg Bundy.
Oh,
and so
I love her.
I loved that show growing up, right? I bought this giant wig. I bought these giant heels and this tacky leopard dress in Los Angeles. And I put it on when we got back to his parents' house. And I was just like, look at my Halloween costume, right? He was like, oh God. Next thing you know, October comes around and I'm like, I just can't go out right for Halloween. I have to practice. So every weekend in October, I'm like practicing, right?
So you just dress up and walk around New York? Like,
no,
as
I
Peg Bundy?
would like dress up and I would go to this one specific gay bar. At first, I went to this gay bar like really far outside of my norm because I was like, all right, if it's a flop, I'll never see these people again. It'll be a flop, right? So it was in the West Village, you know, and it was received quite well. And so then I was like, oh, this is kind of addicting, right? Because it's adrenaline and it's like, it was very addicting. I'm also 6'3" in regular shoes. So like in 4-inch platforms with this 12-inch wig, you know, I'm 7 feet tall, you know? And so
it's powerful.
Yeah. Just in New York City, you have all these people walking and like all these eyes are on you and they're just, and at this point, being from Alabama, you can look at me with hate eyes all you want, or you can look at me with wow eyes, any type of eyes, you know, I'll take it, you know? Next thing you know, I started going to Hell's Kitchen, which is where I would usually go because I worked right down the street. And I started going over and over again and started making friends in the drag community. And I started, you know, and my roommate at the time was really supportive. I think he dressed up as like, he just put random makeup on his face and wore tights or something. And he went out with me, you know.
Were you wearing like lashes and...
Oh, you pull it up if you want.
What?
You
Yeah,
have your computer in front of you. If you go to Facebook, type in Onna Rampaige. Onna Rampaige. ONNA space RAMPAIGE. And the way that I came up with that name, I was working at Saks Fifth Avenue, and I was privileged enough to meet a lot of celebrities at the time. And one day I heard a laugh, and I'm like, I know who this is. Look to my left, and here is walking RuPaul, dressed as a man, but RuPaul, right? That distinctive laugh. And I'm like, here we go. This is right after I started. And the person I was dating was a theater major, and he really didn't mind that I was doing drag, but he did not like that I would be out at night. Just wasn't his picture of perfect. So I see RuPaul. Next thing you know, we're having this long conversation. He's from Georgia, moved to New York. We're relating, and he says, sounds like you're on a rampage. And I'm like, you know what? That's it. I am on a rampage. And in New York, there's a lot of names that are puns, you know? So
yeah.
So
you mean as far in the drag community?
In the drag community,
okay.
Yeah. So there's Keisha Carr and a good friend of mine, Jasmine Rice, you know. So just like funny names, you know. So I'm like, on a rampage, perfect. So I did the whole 9. I got pads, I padded, I got all these wigs, got outfits, you know, perfected the makeup. And I'm not trying to look like a woman. I'm trying to look I have tattoos all over my body, so I wanted to look like a tattooed 1980s prostitute-ish rock and roll creature, basically.
I love your ink work, by the way.
Thank you. It's not all done, but thank you.
How long have you been working on it for?
I think when I was anti-tattoo, Lindsay passed, I decided to do a memorial tattoo for her. Having a moment in my life that is permanently etched on my body, I became addicted, and it started in 2005. My right arm is completed. Then I did my left arm. It's halfway done. I need to finish, but I get them all in Daphne. Mobile, but now they're in Daphne. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So,
can I see your piece for Lindsay?
For Lindsay, it's this one. It's my first one.
Oh.
A little swallow with a heart in her name. You know, like a classic design. And then the second one, I did the hula woman, so she's in paradise.
Are these called Sailor Jerry-esque
tattoos? So I really liked how each memory, like a sailor goes from port to port, and all of his tattoos are brought together under the stars, like his travels, right? I really love the concept of that. So all of mine are memories, not travels. All of mine are memories that are brought together through the heavens, through the stars and dots. So I just really like the concept of that a lot.
Yeah, I like the stars and I like the dots too.
Yeah.
I like the shading.
Yeah, I love the coloring. That's my favorite thing about, his name's Pony. He's in Daphne at Belle Rose Tattoo. I just go to him with an idea, he'll draw it up, and I'm 100% confident that he will color it just the way that I like, so.
I like this piece on your hand too.
Oh, these?
Yeah.
So these kind of signify... I know I said what I said about that dynamic of my parents and the dropping of Junior, but I am grateful of my past, you know, the highs and the lows. I had many great experiences, many hard experiences, but at the end of the day, I'm appreciative of it all, you know. And so I have a portrait of a female on my left hand and a male on my right hand. The male is a nautical kind of sailor-esque character. And this kind of, to me, signifies a locket. And I really like how someone wears a locket when someone goes away and they can reflect on a picture and reminisce, you know? So I got this kind of in a theory of true love waits. So he would go out to work or wherever he may go out, and my mom would be at home and just kind of hold down the fort and wait for him, you know? And it just is a testimony to me that love is enduring, you know?
Yeah.
These were kind of a moment because all of mine I could conceal with a suit. And these are the first ones that, since they're on the top of my hands, that are, you know, visible at all times.
They're beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just going to your site really quick. I just wanted to look through here. I thought, oh my gosh. So wait, was this in the beginning?
No. Let me show you some.
Look at the contouring. Do you love contouring?
I love... I think the most addicting part of it, well, there's multiple reasons why it's addicting, but the moment that I would visualize something and have an idea of a direction I would want to go, right? My sister is very artistic as far as drawing. I was more musically inclined. I was always low-key jealous of her artistic abilities with drawing. And so for me to stand in front of a mirror and to be able to paint, you know, and to layer and paint on my face just to make my face a different character into something that I'm visualizing. It really was amazing. And you get to a certain point in your makeup that you start to see the creation. It's called getting into your fantasy, you know? And then once you finish it off with the outfit and then the hair and whatever you're going to do, and you look into the mirror, your whole person as you are every day of your life is changed. And you're looking at your reflection and you are not you. And it is so weird and addicting. And then you go out in public and you see the reaction to your idea. And sometimes it was a flop, sometimes it was a win, you know? And that part is addicting as well. It's just like, it's just amazing to me.
Is the drag community, is it welcoming? Is it a very welcoming community?
It is. It's like a family. Like, you know, just like anything else in New York, it's the best of the best. You know, it's so expensive to live. It's, you know, all the variables. So it's a lot of talented people that live in New York City.
Right.
And people that are working queens that are getting paid for being at whatever venue and doing whatever show, that's their gig, you know? And so they obviously, when it's a new person that comes along, they don't want to lose their gig. But then again, you know, they relate to what it's like to be as confident as you have to be as a person to do this. So it is like a family, you know? It is very supportive. It's very encouraging, and it's so weird. So when I moved from New York here, I stopped doing it. You know, I told myself, all right, I need to focus some of this energy into other aspects, right? And take that time to really, you know, improve other areas of my life, you know, because I'm really focus driven. And it's really amazing to me because RuPaul's Drag Race, every season recently, there are people I see on the television that I worked with. And I know, you know, this past season on Thursday nights, I had a party with Peppermint every Thursday night, you know, and she was runner number 2, you know, and Drag Race, runner up number 2. And then season before, Bob, I knew Bob, and Thorgy, you know, Thorgy and I have the same exact birthday. We had a birthday party together, you know. So it's just so crazy to see the, talent getting recognized.
Yeah.
And I know these people. It's so crazy.
Are you thinking at all about
doing it again? Yes is the answer.
Okay.
You know, I mentioned Taxi Cab Confessions, you know, and just seeing all the most freakish people on television growing up that live in the city. And then full circle, I am now one of those people.
Right.
And I just loved that so much, you know, that I could do what I wanted to do and not care at all about what people think, you know.
And can you describe what Hell's Kitchen is?
So Hell's Kitchen is a neighborhood. It's right outside of Times Square. It's primarily on 9th Avenue, going from, I would say, 42nd Street up to Central Park South, 56th Street. And it is a very gay area. I mean, you've always heard of Chelsea, but Chelsea as a neighborhood is developed and grows, and it prices out a lot of people. And so a lot of people move to the adjacent neighborhood. Hell's Kitchen is Chelsea's adjacent neighborhood. So a lot of younger people thus have moved to Hell's Kitchen, and it's becoming New York's new, well, I guess it is not becoming New York's gay neighborhood. So
do most drag queens go in that neighborhood to different venues in that neighborhood? Do they travel to different other neighborhoods?
I would say both. I had a gig in Chelsea, but I primarily hung out in Hell's Kitchen. The only hard line is Brooklyn and Manhattan. I mean, Brooklyn queens identified with a certain aesthetic, and Manhattan queens identify in a different aesthetic. And a lot of times there's not a common denominator between the two, you know. It's like, oh, there's a gig in Brooklyn, you know. Sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to go all the way to Brooklyn, you know. There's certain people that have worked in the theater industry that their mentality is they're going to maybe just do their face. They'll travel to the gig and then they turn into the character at the gig and they perform, right? For me, I liked to see New Yorkers gag as I travel to the gig, you know? So I would take public trains and whatever to get there. And so it was part of the illusion, you know? And it's very different in New York City. In New York City, it's more art. You're trying to be like a walking piece of art.
It's beautiful. So you're wearing a lot of different contacts?
Yeah, I like to wear blue contacts.
I like it. Most drag queens, do they want to get photos with people?
Oh, yeah.
Most drag queens are welcoming to strangers coming up to them and saying,
oh, yeah.
Can I get
that's
a photo
part of the
with
job, you know, like the bar usually hires. So ultimately, if a bar hires you, it's to drive up drink sales.
Okay.
Obviously. So the more people you photograph with, the more social media tags there are, the busier the bar could be.
Okay.
Maybe not that night, but in revolving parties, you know, next week or the week after, you know, so it all drives up.
What about when you're walking on the street? Is it okay to approach?
Yeah, of course.
Then?
Yeah, it's flattering, you know.
Okay.
So it would take 2 to 3 hours to get ready. You know, you're ready, and then you go to a gig for 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it may be. And then it takes 30 minutes to wash off. It's like 3 hours to get ready, and then 4 hours for wearing it. So, yeah, as much attention as you can get.
When you first started doing this, did you just go full throttle into, is it called drag queening? Would you say drag queening?
Yeah, being a queen.
Being a queen.
Yeah, full throttle. So I didn't want, but everyone does their own thing. You know, there's drag there's no hard definition. Drag is an acronym for dressing in regards to another gender. So there's certain people that pad, there's certain people that don't pad. So that means creating false hips or false breasts. There's people, you know, that do that don't do that. There's people that use facial hair that don't use facial hair. There's people that glue down their eyebrows and redraw them. There's people that use their natural brows. There's, you know, all sorts of different definitions and standards. And it's just on what you want to be perceived as, you know, what you want to project. What is your vision? Some people have the same look, different outfits, but the same look, you know, every gig, you know, it's whatever your fantasy is, you know. There's bio queens, which are naturally born females that dress up in female drag. So it's just very exaggerated makeup and wigs and outfits, you know. There's no definition, you know. There's drag kings, you know.
Yeah, what is a drag king?
A drag king is a female, a cis-born female that dresses as a male. Drag kings are not as prevalent, in my opinion, as drag queens.
Yeah, I was
or maybe I just don't go to the right places. I don't know. But
well, I had never heard of the term before.
Yeah.
So I was at this stand-up thing like a week ago, and a girl there said that she's a drag king.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. And then I immediately in my mind was trying to picture what her character would look like.
Yeah.
And I realized it was like a futile attempt, you know, because I can't possibly know.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, that sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I start to do it again, I definitely want to have a drag party where everyone has to come dressed in what their version is of drag. And I'm talking about gay people, straight people, you know, whatever it may be. I think that would be a lot of fun because I have a lot of female friends. So I'm curious to see that amount of drag kings, you know.
Or they can be, I guess, what, bio queens too?
Yeah, they could be bio queens if they want, you know. So so I would do this because first of all I can, you know, and I recognize that I am privileged enough at the time to live in a city that is accepting of doing that. I love that, you know, because I'm from Alabama, where I would never have done this in Alabama ever, you know. And so in New York, I could express myself in a way that I thought was creative and fun. And there were some nights I had an idea and I was just like, I don't know about this. And then I would get myself ready. And then at the end of the night, usually all my friends would go to this 24-hour diner kind of across the street from where the night was. Hilarious. 4 a.m. at a Hell's Kitchen or a Times Square diner is a scene, right? So because you have these people that are from other countries that have never experienced things like this, that are just like, what is happening right now? You know?
Oh, yes. I forgot about that this is not just Americans who are seeing. These are like people from tourists
around the world that are like, what is happening? So I felt as if, you know, that movie Coyote Ugly, whenever Tyra Banks, you know, she's at the diner counting her money, you know, and she's like, whatever, the main character's like, to the guy that works there, what do they do? You know, and she's like, oh, they work at Coyote Ugly or whatever the scene is. You know, I honestly felt like that, you know, because at the end of the night, I'd be counting money, you know, and there'd be these international tourists just looking, you know.
What does he do?
Right?
Or what does that
what is happening right
now?
But on this particular night with this photo here, no confidence in myself. I was just like, you know what, I'm going to do it. And at the end of the night, I made more money than what I had ever made. And I didn't do drag for income per se. I did drag to support my hobby. So I had a hobby and I was lucky enough to get paid to support my hobby, which I feel blessed for, you know?
Yeah.
I regulated myself to 2 gigs a week. I would try not to do them on, you know, consecutive nights because that was exhausting, but...
So when you first started doing this, like what was your original draw to it?
I don't know. I just wanted to be, like I said, I wanted to be recognized, you know, that sense, small town sense, like, oh, hey, how are you? You know, like random strangers coming up.
Yeah.
You know, and I wanted just to, you know, not just be the new to New York person at the bar chatting to the bartender, you know, not having any friends, you know. And so I just wanted to express myself and I wanted to just try New York for what it is, you know. each time I tried, each time it progressed and things got better and better, and I just had a really good time. You know, the next thing you know, a bar manager would say, hey, do you want to do this? Or a DJ would say, hey, do you want to do this? And, you know, and then I would just make up a number and I would say, I charge this much, you know, and then they'd be like, all right. So now I'm making money for doing a hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I said earlier, whenever I would see myself in the mirror after getting ready, it would be a wow moment. But even more of a wow moment is whenever you would arrive to the bar, and bars are dark. A lot of bars in New York are smoky. Not smoky with cigarettes, but, you know, fog machine smoky. And with the theatrical contacts where I couldn't see too well, let me tell you, in the mirror, I couldn't, it was like a double take. It was like, who is that? Oh, that's me. Oh my God, you know?
Did you ever end up going to like university and studying at college or anything like that?
I did. So after Lindsay passed away, I ended up going back to Mobile, and I ended up getting a job at a funeral home. So I worked at a bank for a little bit, and it really wasn't for me because it was the same thing repetitive over and over again, and I was going crazy. So I ended up going to a grief counseling session at a funeral home, and they ended up, I guess, liking me and offering me a position for a family service counselor, which is a glorified salesperson. I would go and I had reading materials to give families, and I would just relate to them in certain ways and help them, you know, with their family members' recent loss. So it really helped me out as far as therapy for myself to deal with families, you know, and a lot of families would come at the end of the day and say, thank you for, you know, helping me in this time. And I honestly at that time could say, thank you for helping me at this time as well, you know? And so the funeral home ended up sponsoring me. So funeral industry is an apprentice industry. So I ended up going for the trade of funeral directing. So
you ended up going to school for that?
Yeah, funeral directing, embalming, cremationist. And it's really morbid to say if you didn't experience what I experienced, but I really love to see is a weird intro to this, but I really enjoy being able to help people in a time of need. I helped myself by helping other people.
Yeah.
And the second that it turned to work, like it's 6:00 and I still have to meet with this family. As soon as I didn't have that devotion that I had, I knew things needed to change. And so then I made a pro and con list, and I ended up going to a little culinary school in Mobile because, you know, I wanted to do something that I enjoyed, and I enjoyed cooking. So, and then I was actually baking. So when I moved to Florida, when I moved the first time to Miramar Beach outside of Destin, I moved and I was a baker. And so when I moved to New York, technically I was looking for baking jobs.
Yeah.
But I quickly realized that baking in New York is an overnight gig, and I didn't want to work overnight new to a city. So
how did you end up getting into the line of work that you're in now?
I moved here July 1st, and on July 4th, I went to a July 4th party, and I don't even really remember what I said because I was drinking a little bit. And lo and behold, a few days later at Trader Joe's, 2 people approached me and they were like, oh, hey again, from July 4th. We liked our conversation. Why don't you come in for an interview? And I was like, okay. And I ended up going in to an award management company. It's a weird take of a PR company. Based on the marketing and the PR and all of the things that I did in New York, I ended up getting hired with this company, freelance, that works with Hulu, Netflix, HBO, all these major Hollywood hitters. They do all of the award entries for their creative marketing work. And so I would be responsible for making the websites to actually get the work on a website to the judging panel. And so I would mimic all of these major entertainment company's website, and I'd build these, I called them landing pages or splash pages. And I did that for a little over a year, and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, one of the large accounts decided to take the award management in-house instead of out of house for the company.
Yeah.
And so one of my coworkers was told that they were going to have to reduce her hours. And so then I was a little nervous myself because I was freelancing, you know, and it was my first year in Los Angeles. And I always told myself, all right, I'm going to dedicate a year. I like to dedicate a year to something to kind of feel it out and really give it all for a year. And if it takes off, it takes off. If it doesn't, you know, at that point, I'm going to reevaluate. So I was kind of just in a discouraged funk. And that's whenever Trump was elected around that time. So I really decided, I was like, you're right. If I'm freelancing and I have a lot of free time on my hands, I'm going to start doing some volunteering. Started volunteering. And I started volunteering with a lot of gay organizations because where I was working, this company was right on the corner of Hollywood and Vine. And right around the corner is a LGBT senior center. It's like a retirement home.
I know that place.
Yeah.
I've seen it before and I was like, oh.
Yeah. So I was like, how do I get in here to volunteer? Because I would love this, you know, like running a bingo or something. Like I would love it, right? And so, because I would see some of the people that live in this building, like, you know, around while I was getting lunch or whatever, and they seemed really fun, right? So they said at the time that the senior center, they were not accepting volunteers, but they were accepting for seniors at the LGBT center computer lab for senior services. So I was like, all right, that's right up my alley as well. So I started running the computer lab at the LGBT Center for senior citizens on Thursdays. It was basically like a sitcom. Like I loved it. It was every moment there was something hilarious happening. And so every day before I would leave, I would, you know, when it comes to public computers or anything, I'm a little bit of a germaphobe, you know, so I would always go to the bathroom and wash up before I would leave, you know. So on the route to washing up is a community board, and I saw an advert on the community board. It said now hiring. And I read the description and I was just like, I can do this. Like, what is this? You know, is this real? You know?
Yeah.
Is this like one of those fake adverts to solicit something else, you know?
Right.
And so I basically wrote a really funny, kind of lengthy email and I attached Homer Simpson's picture to it. And I really was not thinking anything was going to come of it, you know? And the next thing you know, I got a phone call. And it was the owner of the company. And I was actually getting my oil changed. So I was like, no pen, no paper, like not prepared for this phone conversation. Yeah. And we had a nice phone interview. And then a few days later, I went in for an interview. And a few days later, the New York office interviewed me. And I was offered a position. And the office is new in Los Angeles, so they needed someone to help start up the office in LA and get it together, and that's what I'm doing. You know, the owner is amazing. Yeah. And he said that they posted the position on all the professional sites, you know, LinkedIn and Indeed and all these other sites. And that at the end of the day, he posted it a few days before on the bulletin board. And he wanted someone that volunteered at the LGBT Center because he's initially from New York. And as a youth, he frequented the LGBT Center and it helped him out a lot growing up. And so it just was the right timing and the right place. And just the stars were aligned.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, I'm wondering, so since you moved here, have you been doing like any dating? I know you said you're focusing. I know that takes a lot of effort, I know, because there is something to do here always.
Yeah. Well, I actually was in New York City and I was on all the dating apps and I was on OkCupid and I was swiping left, swiping right with everyone else, right? And I started reading a profile and I was just like, why is my phone showing me someone in Los Angeles? So it turns out that I honestly thought that someone was catfishing someone because then we started messaging each other, exchanged phone numbers, and I was like, forget all this. I'm going to FaceTime right now. FaceTime. And deny. And I was just like, this person is not real, you know? Yeah. Even though, would I have answered a FaceTime call to a stranger? I don't know, but... You know, at the time in New York, like you don't waste time. Like,
you were cutting through that riffraff.
Right? Yeah. So it turns out that it was a real person, and he's a cyclist, and he does the AIDS Life Cycle every year, which is a charity bike ride from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And it's an over 500-mile bike ride. Takes about a week. So he was doing it, and I was just like, you know what? I love that. That's a very charitable cause. I'm going to fly to Los Angeles and surprise him at the finish line. Why not? Right? And so I flew to Los Angeles. My plane was rerouted. We landed at some random airport, and I met this guy that was on the same plane trying to get to LA. His name was David. And I was like, where are you going in Los Angeles? And he said to West Hollywood. And I was like, do you mind if I bum a ride from whoever's picking you up, right? And so his friend picked us up, and we drove to West Hollywood. I had missed the finish line, so now I was going to this guy's house. So I was in the car messaging, what is your address? And first, he sends me to his work. And I'm just like in the car with a stranger driving, with a person I met on a plane, doing a drive-by to someone's work. And I was just like, you guys, you mind if we go to one more address? Next thing you know, we go to this other address, which is right around the corner. And I'm in the back seat, and it's an SUV. And I open the door, get my bag out, and I look back, and I have a scar under my eyebrow. And I hit my brow bone on the door frame of the SUV, and it pops open my scar. So now I'm at the door of this guy's house with my bag after he did almost a 600-mile bike ride, and I have blood pouring down my face. And so I hit the buzzer, and I'm like, surprise, I'm here. And he comes out. He just got out of the shower, and he's like, what the hell? You have, and then he welcomes me in, and he's going to clean my open wound on my face, and his hands are shaking, and I'm like, oh, he's more nervous than I am, and I just flew across the country, and so we ended up going to eat something, and he ordered for me, and it was all my favorite things that he remembered from our conversations. And so I was just like, and I allotted a few days, here. His mother also passed away right around the same exact time that my mother passed away. So we had so much in common in that aspect. The next thing you know, I was just like, I think I might move to Los Angeles. Initially it was, do you mind if I move in with you until I find my own place? And then that turned into, let's just live together. And then that turned to, let's get married.
Oh my gosh.
And then that's what it is. And then, so my sister moved next door, and then we ended up moving downtown to our first place together, that we picked out together or whatever. And that was 2 years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Where did you guys get married?
Well, we did a shotgun marriage at the city hall. And,
which I heard is nice, actually.
Yeah, it was nice. Where we had someone also LGBT, someone that ordained our wedding, which was really nice. And we're gonna do an official ceremony, and we're planning it out. It's gonna be a traditional luau in Hawaii, I think.
I'm so happy for you.
A lot of hard work in the past 2 years, and and it's really rewarding. It's extremely rewarding whenever you really dedicate your time and energy to something, and relationship, career, everything falls full circle, and it just is working. It really feels nice,
Yeah. Can you describe that a little bit more? What you mean by that?
Well,
are you talking about commitment or?
No, I'm just talking about life in general, in New York City. So in Alabama, it was just, I was young. Things were very confusing. I was being hit in multiple directions by a lot of things, a lot of variables. And I processed things as the best I could. And I just felt as if I needed a fresh start to a clean slate. Florida was my vessel. Ended up in New York City. New York City through my 20s gave me my creative expression. It gave me where I could express myself, really experiment with everything that I wanted to try, creative wise. I was just unsatisfied with my living condition, because in New York, your apartment is small. If your apartment's big, then that means you're commuting far away. And if you're living in the middle of the hustle, then your apartment's going to be small. And it is that way because the whole city is your backyard. I enjoyed that for what it was, but then I just got tired, you know? If I wanted to cook dinner, then you're carrying everything, you're lugging everything, you're climbing stairs, you're doing all of this, right? And it costs more to cook your own dinner than it is to go out to eat. And I would see older people, and by older people I mean 70s or 80s, living their life, and I would watch them and I would think to myself, do I want to live here until I'm that age? And the answer was an immediate no. And then I would ask myself, where would be my next chapter? And I think it was divine intervention that this OkCupid profile came up, you know. And so it just sparked my curiosity. I was very anti-LA when I was in New York, but I think that's a common New York attitude, you know. So I moved here, and for the first year living in Hollywood, I despised it. I was going to move back because I was not familiar with the city. I was not used to driving far distances or short distances. It takes forever, you know, the whole aspect of it. And we moved downtown, and at that point I fell in love with the city, and especially the Arts District, which is an area of town that's downtown, but it's really downtown adjacent, and they're all warehouses, and they're renovating them or refabbing them or constructing new units. And it's just really, I don't know, I really like the vibe of it and the walkability and what's there, you know?
Yeah, so, I like the Arts District too.
Yeah.
I'm glad you found a place like a neighborhood.
It opened up a whole nother, like, it really is what made me fall in love with the city, you know, and to have a home base that you really enjoy every day coming home to. And that really pushes me to work harder, try new creative methodologies at work to strive to reach my full potential, you know? So
just closing down here, I'm wondering, I've been asking so far the three people that I interviewed if they have any advice that they wanted to give to people who are maybe still in the closet or, you know, trying to figure things out for themselves.
Well, I think the first thing I would say is do not feel an obligation to label yourself. You are who you are. Because when you label yourself, that gives you and also others a chance to make you feel less than and for others to feel greater than. And as far as I'm concerned, everyone, you know, should be equal. Everyone is equal and should be treated equal. And I just don't care for labels. I think they're sometimes unnecessary. Like a label, if it's a poisonous substance and a non-poisonous substance, I'm all for labels. But when it comes to human beings, I just feel as if you should get to know them before you judge them, whether you like them or not, based on their character. So first of all, don't feel that you should label yourself. Just be comfortable and just, you know, if you want to try something and if it works for you, keep doing it. And if you want to try something and it doesn't work for you, stop doing it. That doesn't mean you're necessarily whatever way society tells you are. And then the second thing, I think, which I hear quite often, and it is true, and so I'll repeat it, is just keep trying. Things get way better, you know, no matter how bad things may seem or how hard things may seem, and how alone you may feel and how confused you may feel. Any emotion that you may have that you're unsure of, be the best you that you can be, and try not to focus on those labels. And it really has to do with find people that are like-minded. You know, surround yourself with like-minded. They don't even have to be like-minded, just other positive people, you know, supporting people.
Yeah.
You know, things will start falling into place.
You're like the third person to kind of say that things are going to get better.
Yeah.
Which I think is such a hopeful thing to keep your brain focused on.
And I think it's because of confusion. It's a lot of, for me at least, it was a lot of mental conflict. Having society standards and norms in the Deep South, and then just feeling as if this is who I am. Why do I have a whole society telling me that it's bad or wrong, or, you know, saying things with such anger? towards me, you know, like I just feel that really difficult to understand, you know, and I moved so I could live a more true life. And because of that, I found way more confidence in myself, such confidence that I felt comfortable doing drag. The confidence has just flourished to where I feel as if now I could do whatever I set my mind to, you know? And honestly, if given the chance, I would love to move back to Alabama, because now I am a confident person that I know who I am now, and I know what I can contribute, and I know the value that I have in myself. And I won't let anyone tell me otherwise or treat me otherwise. And so as an adult, you know, I'm much stronger of a person than I was, you know, 5 years ago. So
Yeah.
if you're in a point where you're very depressed, and you're depressed because of situations with coming out or your sexuality or whatnot, find, even if it's not a personal characteristic trait, find something that you like or enjoy. It can be something like coloring, or you like eating lasagna, or like whatever you might like. Find something you find joy in and just do it, you know, just enjoy it and treat yourself, you know. And then whenever you're in that moment of treating yourself, think to yourself, you know, I really enjoy, I'm in my happy place right now, you know, and then try to think of a second thing that you find joy in, that happiness, you know, and, you know, try to do that multiple times a week, you know, and then on one day a week, try to have, you know, a day that it's filled with joy, filled with happiness, you know, and try to pull yourself up, claw yourself up out of, you know, the place that you may be in, you know.
Yes.
You have to have drive. You know, that's the key ingredient, you know? So
I like what you said, though. It's like, just find one thing that you find joy in. Just start with one thing.
Start with one thing and then add to it slowly, you know? And if that's, you know, having lasagna, and then try, maybe invite someone over to have lasagna with, you know, that good friend, you know, and like, then maybe go out to your, you know, your favorite place to have that lasagna, you know, and add one thing at a time, you know, and then pretty soon you'll have a day date, you know, and pull yourself up out of the spot, you know. And I know in the South, when I said I enjoyed the music and that's why I like to go to the gay bars, it is true. That is true. But that was a false sense of security to get my friends to go with me. But going to those gay bars in the South, and you see protesters with such hateful signs sometimes, protesting and picketing, you know, while you're trying to go in and have a good time and express yourself, that could be discouraging. But, you know, whenever someone doesn't understand you, it often makes them angry. You know, if you're insecure, you're angry, you know. If somebody's shouting at you, or if somebody is projecting anger, then they are confused about something and they don't understand something. And just realize that and ask them, you know, what can I help you understand about me? And break down that false sense of labeling, you know. Get to know me as a person.
That's really good.
Yeah. Actually today, I've been nesting. I'm in a nesting mode.
Because of the heat, or just like...
No, because of, you know, as years go on, I just really, I don't know, I've been nesting like I want a home, you know?
Yeah.
And I often look at homes in Daphne, you know, where I grew up, because I would love, because my mom's no longer there. My father, I don't really speak to him very much, but he's in Texas, you know, and I do go to Daphne often because I do get tattoos there. And I do drive around. I have such fond memories of growing up there.
Yeah.
And so I look at properties there, and I came across one this morning. And it's very interesting. And it's funny enough, you know, that I'm speaking about where I grew up.
Right.
And then I'm finding somewhere that I might want to move to that happens to be in the same spot I grew up, you know?
Yeah. Do you believe in synchronicity?
I do.
Do you think that's what's happening?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been doing this thing lately, Robert, where, because I really feel like God talks to me a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not like I would be purposely going against the grain of something, but you know how like something could come up in your mind, and you have the right to choose if you're going to do it or not.
Right.
Lately, if something really comes up in my mind, I just am doing it, or like following through. Like if someone comes up in my mind, I reach out to them and stuff. And I've been feeling like there's this like carpet that's like rolling out in front of me.
Yeah.
It's just like one roll at a time. But it feels like I'm totally on the path that I'm supposed to be on.
Yeah.
And for the first time in like, I don't know if I ever felt this way in my life before, but I do feel like I am right where I'm supposed to be.
That's a great feeling.
Yeah, I feel very peaceful about it. And but I also am choosing to believe it.
Yeah.
Like I feel as much as it's stuff that's coming, I don't know. Like I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'll say a prayer like, God, should I even be doing this podcast? And then whatever episode I'm on, whatever the topics are for that particular episode will happen in my life.
Right.
People will start talking about it, or like I see images about it and I'm just like, I am right where I'm supposed
Your
to be.
path is the line.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly believe that. I think that I believe that, If something doesn't work out, it's just a nudge to the right direction of where you should be,
Yeah. Yeah. Trying not to let things like that really bother me, or I don't know. I'm trying not to read into things too much these days.
Yeah.
But I love that you're nesting. And when you're nesting, what kind of special things are you doing while you're nesting? Are you just...
I don't know. I'm just nesting. It's just that, I feel myself, I don't know how to explain it. I don't want to sound like a grandpa, but I just feel as if, like what you said, things have aligned so perfectly in my path.
Yeah. And
I can say certain things like, oh, I've worked hard for this, but I honestly think that things, just like what you just said, have been rolled out. My path I'm following suit to a path I'm meant to be on.
Yeah.
And I'm not fighting it. Before I would have fought it, and I would just be like, I'm questioning this.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something to buck this path. And I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just following the path. I'm rolling with the punches, I'm going with it. It's taking me to where, like I said, I don't really go out. And so that's really hard for me, because moving from New York, going out often as a performer, and then not going out at all. It's not easy, but if that's where the path is taking me, that's where the path is taking me, And so that's why I have confidence, if I'm meant to do things like that again, then I'll do it again, If not, then no, Sometimes
there is a real quietness though before that storm.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about in the beginning, but
right.
Not saying a storm would happen. I'm just saying like you're recognizing that maybe you still want to participate in the drag community and stuff, which is really cool. So right now is like a quiet time before.
Right. And I that's another word of advice, patience, that comes with, what the last piece of advice is, but I used to not be patient at all. I needed instant results. And I think that now I've learned patience, and it has really brought things to my life, And so when it comes to drag, it's been 2 years, but I don't have to do it today or tomorrow or this week. I don't have to plan on doing it again. It will happen when it happens,
Totally.
It could be a creative break of 3-5 years. If it happens again, it happens again, The path will roll out, and it will be when it is.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Patience is something that I've learned to have, and it's helped me out a lot.
Well, Robert, thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. I hope that anything that I said, someone can relate to. I hope, that would be something amazing for me. Just relate. It was just one sentence, even 2 sentences, and just try to find your truth, your inner truth, and just live a happy life, just live a happy life.
To see breathtaking photos of Robert as Onna Rampaige, please do yourself a favor and go to his Facebook page, Onna Rampaige. That's ONNA space RAMPAIGE. You will not be disappointed. Thank you to Robert for going out of his way and rescheduling twice with me in order to share his story. And thank you to Tyler Faison for introducing me to Robert. Also, a huge thank you to Leland Bobbe for the use of his beautiful image for the cover art for this episode. If you haven't seen it yet, the image is part of Leland's half-drag portrait series and is of Robert, only it's half Robert and half Onna Rampaige. And it's beautiful, as are the rest of the portraits in Leland's half-drag series. I highly recommend going to Leland's site and perusing through the portraits. You can find them at lelandbobbe.com. That's LelandBobbe.com. Or you can see them on Leland's Instagram at LelandBobbeNYC. If you have a question or comment, please email me at mostlyminutia@gmail.com. Playing underneath this is a track called Climbing Out by the artist Home off the Falling Into Place album. You can find more of Home at bandcamp.com. And as always, you can find links to all these in the show notes wherever you're currently listening to this episode, or on my site, colleenlindell.com. This episode of Mostly Minutia is dedicated to and in loving memory of Lindsay Chain, and was recorded on location in my apartment in Glendale, California.
And actually, my most fond memory of Tyler is going out on the sailboat with my father, my sister, and myself, and Tyler. And we were out, I think somewhere, Pensacola, Florida. And Tyler was eating grapes, and he couldn't really handle the waves. And he got a little sick mid-conversation to my sister. And he just did the 1 second finger and then just got sick, it was all grapes, and it was inside of the boat. And it was just, I'll never forget that. It was kind of hilarious. But